Have you ever really stopped to think, I mean, probably think, what would actually happen if the world as we know it just
Sure.
stopped? Not just a power cut for a few hours, but something bigger, like the grid going down for good, or technology just failing. It's a pretty heavy thought, right? One we usually prefer not to dwell on. Well, today we're doing just that. We're taking a deep dive into a system called Blast Proof David's Shield. It's presented as a guide, claiming to offer a full strategy, really, for protecting your family if the grid fails and, well, things get chaotic. So our mission here is to unpack this system. We're working from the sources we were given, looking at its core purpose, its survival approach, and what the creators, and maybe more importantly the users, say makes it different. We want to understand what it is, why it exists, and the principles behind it. Okay, so let's dig into this central idea. The blast-proof David's Shield system seems to be built on a really significant premise. We're talking about the potential collapse of, well, modern civilization. The sources point to things like an EMP, that's an electromagnetic pulse, right?
Or maybe other big systemic breakdowns. It sounds like a guide for truly worst-case scenarios.
Right, and what's really interesting, I think, is how the program frames these threats. It isn't just, say, a natural disaster plan. The sources do specifically mention EMPs, yes, and these other systemic breakdowns, but they also bring up this wider concern about technology becoming less reliable and how much we depend on complex AI systems now for, well, almost everything. It kind of suggests we're maybe inherently vulnerable because we're so connected. And there's another layer the sources mention quite distinct. The system claims it helps you prepare for or withstand what some interpretations call the beast system, from the Book of Revelation, often linked to kind of centralized power structure emerging after a collapse. So it's presented not just as physical survival, but thriving through faith, through wisdom, and having a really secure, prepared home.
That definitely adds a different dimension compared to a lot of standard survival stuff. So, given that scope, who's actually behind this? The sources name a Henry Morris, described as a seasoned survival expert. What else do they tell us about him? Makes you wonder about his background.
Well, the sources position him as someone with significant real-world experience, not just theory. They don't list, like, specific degrees or anything, but the vibe is definitely practical, hands-on knowledge, from actually doing it. He's presented as someone who gets the nuts and bolts of self-sufficiency, of resilience, and that seems to be why the program focuses on these actionable, down-to-earth solutions. It's definitely pitched as something different, promising a unique angle, accessible, not the usual you need tons of expensive gear approach.
Okay, yeah, that's where it gets really interesting for me. Because so many guides are about gear, stockpiling this, buying that. But the sources explicitly say David's Shield isn't that. It's not another complex gear-heavy program. So what is the unique blend then? What actually sets it apart?
That's the key question, really. If we look at the bigger picture painted by the sources, the program seems to weave together three main strands: ancient survival strategies, practical modern knowledge, and perhaps crucially, biblical wisdom. It also specifically mentions drawing on the knowledge of the Amish way of life, their self-sufficiency. So it kind of challenges that typical survivalist thinking. Instead of complex tech that might just fail anyway, it suggests real resilience comes from basics, from community wisdom maybe, and a spiritual foundation. It stresses being spiritually ready alongside having practical skills, building resilience through faith and knowledge, not just stuff.
Right. That's a very different philosophy.
It's a counter-narrative, really, to our dependency on tech. Preparedness isn't just what you have, but how you think, how you act.
Okay, that sounds, well, incredibly holistic, covering a lot more than just the physical side.
Yeah.
So if it's not about buying loads of expensive gear, what does this actually look like day to day? How does it help you, say, protect your house, or make sure you have food and water, or just feel safe if things go sideways? Can you give us some concrete examples from the sources?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the practical question, isn't it? How does it work without all the fancy gadgets? The system claims to offer step-by-step guidance for different areas, all aimed at self-reliance using, well, simpler things. Okay, so for EMP protection, for example, the guide apparently shows you how to build your own Faraday shield, but the sources stress using simple, low-cost materials. Things you might already have, like metal trash cans or even specific types of foil, not specialized kit. The idea is to protect vital small electronics radios, maybe some medical devices, things you'd really need.
Okay, so practical EMP shielding at home. What else?
Then there's self-sufficiency skills, a whole range of off-grid methods. Think about food without fridges. The guide covers things like fermentation, pickling, Maybe even building a basic root cellar using the ground's temperature.
Like old school preservation.
Exactly. And for water, it teaches filtering methods that don't need power. Maybe using layers of sand, charcoal, cloth, basic stuff to get safe drinking water. And light and heat, too. Instructions for making simple oil lamps, or maybe how to use wood efficiently for heating. Basic, but vital.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about keeping safe? Security.
Right, survival tactics and home security. The sources say it offers practical advice using natural defenses. Could be ways to strengthen doors and windows, create hidden storage, or even set up simple low-tech alert systems. The focus seems to be on protecting essentials and creating security without relying on tech or maybe even complex weapons that might be hard to maintain long-term. Resourcefulness.
Using what's around you.
Precisely. And that's where the Amish-inspired methods really come in, according to the sources. The program integrates techniques directly from their way of life. They're known for being self-sufficient without electricity, right? So principles for growing food effectively without big machinery, storing medicine without refrigeration, maybe using cool spaces or herbal knowledge, and building simple, durable systems that just don't need power. It's about tapping into that kind of timeless, low-tech resilience.
That's fascinating, drawing on that specific knowledge base.
Definitely. And beyond all the physical stuff, there's this major component of spiritual and practical readiness. The sources really highlight this. It's about equipping you to lead your family, not just with supplies, but with faith, wisdom, a calm attitude when things are chaotic. This holistic part, mental, spiritual strength alongside skills, seems to be a key differentiator in the sources, helping maintain morale, make clear decisions under pressure.
And you mentioned accessible. The sources emphasize that, right? Affordable and accessible.
Yes, that's a recurring point. It's not portrayed as needing a huge upfront investment.
It's aimed at, well, regular families, whatever their budget. The focus is on knowledge, on skills, not extensive solutions.
It really doubles down on that idea. Resilience from what you know and how you adapt, not just what you own.
Okay, so we've talked through the concepts, the philosophy, the practical skills it apparently teaches. But what about people who've actually used it? Does it work in the real world? We do have some testimonials here from verified purchasers, apparently. These give us a bit of insight into their experiences. How does it actually play out for families?
Yeah, this is where it gets grounded. The user feedback gives some valuable context showing how these ideas translate. So there's Sarah, a verified purchaser. She apparently said that after looking at tons of prepping guides, this was the only one that really made sense to her. She liked the biblical approach combined with practical, no-nonsense advice.
No nonsense, okay.
And for her, a big thing was learning to prepare without relying on expensive tech gear that she felt could easily fail. That gave her peace of mind.
Peace of mind. That comes up a lot in preparedness circles.
It does. Then there was Lisa. She shared a really direct, practical example. She credited the David's Shield strategies for helping her family stay calm and, well, pretty comfortable during a 9-day power outage from a blizzard.
9 days, wow.
Yeah. She specifically mentioned the off-grid heat and food storage tips as being, quote, lifesavers. It sounds like the low-tech stuff really worked when the grid failed.
That's a strong endorsement from experience.
Definitely. And one more, Emily, who's identified as a pastor, she apparently felt the system perfectly aligns with the teachings she shares. She found the mix of biblical foundation and practical survival advice really valuable, not just for her own family, but also for guiding others in her congregation. She specifically recommended it to any Christian man looking to lead his family through uncertain times, which really underscores that faith and leadership aspect we talked about.
So these experiences definitely seem to back up the program's claims, or at least the users felt they did. They reinforce that aim of providing peace of mind, practical solutions rooted in faith, without needing a fortune spent on gear. It really does position itself as being about inner resilience, knowledge, preparedness, not just external stuff. So, to wrap up our deep dives today, we've looked into blast-proof David's Shield. We explored its core idea, preparing for major societal disruption. We looked at its unique mix, the biblical angle, the practical skills, the Amish methods, and we saw how it aims to give families the tools to, well, thrive, not just get by during tough times, focusing on accessible, sustainable, low-tech knowledge.
And reflecting on all that, it leaves us with a question, perhaps for you, the listener, to think about. In our world, which is so incredibly reliant on these complex, interconnected, fragile systems, how might blending ancient wisdom, like the kind found in scripture or traditional practices, with practical self-sufficiency skills, how might that offer a different kind of resilience, maybe a more enduring kind than what our modern society usually focuses on?